Hello, my research proposal focuses on smartphone interference in academic attention. More specifically, I want to examine whether smartphone notifications can reduce reading retention and academic task performance among college students. Smartphones have become a normal part of academic life, but the same devices students use for communication, organization, and schoolwork can also create frequent interruptions. From a cognitive psychology perspective, this raises an important question about attention. Can something as simple as a phone notification interfere with the cognitive processes needed to understand and remember academic information? My proposal develops a small scale experiment designed to answer that question. This issue matters because smartphones are almost constantly available to students. A student can be reading a textbook or working on an assignment while simultaneously receiving vibrations, messages, or other notifications. Even if the student does not respond, the notification itself may redirect attention away from the primary task. This is important because successful learning depends on maintaining enough attention to encode and retain information. If smartphone interruptions interfere with that process, students may remember less material or need more time to accomplish the same task. The practical importance is that the solution may not require eliminating smartphones entirely. Instead, managing notifications during focused academic work could potentially reduce unnecessary cognitive interference. The two studies supporting this proposal approach the issue from different perspectives. Ilhai and colleagues studied 103 college students and collected objective smartphone use information using the iPhone screen time feature. They examined relationships between smartphone use, procrastination, surface learning, and academic productivity, where one important finding was that academic productivity was moderately negatively related to objectively measured smartphone use minutes. O'Toole provides more direct uh, experimental evidence. Participants completed academic reading passages and later completed a retention quiz. Some experienced no interference, some were exposed to vibrations from a hidden smartphone, and others responded to text messages. Both interference conditions performed worse than the control condition. Together, these students provide a strong reason to experimentally examine notification related academic interference. The cognitive concept at the center of this proposal is interference. Attention is limited, meaning that people cannot process every available stimulus equally while performing a demanding task. Academic reading requires students to focus on written information, understand its meaning, and encode important details into memory. A smartphone notification introduces an additional stimulus competing for those cognitive resources. O'Toole describes smartphone disruption as external interference that can produce internal interference when a person is not actively using the phone. In other words, the vibration itself may trigger thoughts about the phone or what the notification may contain. Attention must then shift away from the reading task before returning to it, potentially reducing the quality of encoding and retention. My primary research question is, do smartphone notification cues reduce reading retention and academic task performance among college students? Based on the previous research, my first hypothesis is that students exposed to smartphone notification cues while reading will receive lower scores on a comprehension and retention test than students who complete the reading without notifications. My second hypothesis is that notification exposure will also decrease efficiency. This could appear as longer completion times or a combination of slower performance and lower accuracy. These hypotheses follow from the idea that notifications consume or redirect our attentional resources that would otherwise be available for processing academic material. For this small scale study, I would recruit approximately 60 undergrads. After providing informed consent, participants would be randomly assigned to one of two groups. The notification group would complete an academic reading task while being exposed to standardized smartphone cues at predetermined points. The control group would complete the same task without those notifications. Both groups would read the exact same passage under the same environmental conditions and complete the same comprehensive and retention quiz afterward. Other smartphone use would not be allowed during the experiment. Random assignment and standardized conditions would help isolate notification exposure as the major difference between the groups. The independent variable would be exposure to smartphone notifications with participants assigned either to the notification condition or the control condition. The primary dependent variable would be the percentage of correct answers on the comprehension and retention quiz, and a secondary outcome would be the task completion time. To test the hypotheses, I would use an independent sample t-test to compare the average quiz scores of the two groups. A second independent sample t-test could compare completion times. This method is appropriate because the study involves two independent groups and continuous outcome measures. In addition to statistical significance, I would report effect sizes because they provide further information about the practical magnitude of any differences. I would expect students in the control condition to demonstrate better retention than students exposed to notification cues. If the hypothesis is supported, the findings would be consistent with O'Toole's evidence that smartphone interference can negatively affect academic task performance. It would suggest that even brief cues can disrupt the attentional processes necessary for effective learning. However, a non-significant result would also provide some useful information. It could indicate that notifications alone are not sufficient to produce a strong academic effect, or that factors such as task difficulty, individual cell phone habits, or notification meaning are influential to the degree of interference. Either outcome would help us to refine our understanding of digital distraction. The potential value of this research is its direct application to student behavior. If notification exposure decreases academic performance, students could improve their study environment through relatively simple strategies such as silencing notifications, placing their phones out of immediate reach, or checking messages only during scheduled breaks. Colleges could also incorporate a digital distraction management plan into student orientation, tutoring, or even study skills programs. There are limitations, however, where a short experimental reading task cannot fully recreate the complexity of studying for an exam or completing a major assignment. Individual differences in motivation, smartphone habits, reading ability, and the personal importance of notifications themselves could also affect results. So, future research could test these effects across longer and more naturalistic study sessions. So, in this project, there were two peer-reviewed scholarly sources used to develop my proposal, which were by Eelhai and colleagues from 2021 and O'Toole from 2024. Eelhai and colleagues provide evidence connecting objectively measured smartphone use with academic behaviors and productivity among college students. O'Toole provides experimental evidence showing that smartphone-related interference, including vibrations without active phone use, can affect performance on an academic reading task. My proposed hypotheses, methodology, and data analysis plan build on these findings but represent a new hypothetical study rather than the results reported by either source. So for the design of this presentation, I wanted the slides to support the narration rather than just repeat everything I was saying. I began with a real-world issue, which is smartphone distraction, and then organized the presentation in the same sequence that a research proposal would follow, as in rationale, existing evidence, cognitive theory, research question, hypotheses, methods, analysis, expected findings, and implications. I then used AI-assisted tools to only help with organization and refine the material, but I based the research content on these scholarly articles and reviewed the presentation to ensure that my hypothetical experiment was clearly distinguished from the findings of the existing studies, and therefore I claim all work to be mine and solely mine. Thank you.